Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting shortly. Great. Good morning, everyone. This is Karen West. I am the Maine Technology Institute's SBIR/STTR, Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Technology Transfer consultant. I have been working for the Maine Technology Institute since 1999 on the SBIR/STTR program. It's a federal program that has funding set aside for small businesses. The beautiful thing about the Maine Technology Institute, and if you're not familiar with them, please visit their website at mainetechnology.org, is during their founding legislation, they were mandated to provide education, outreach, and assistance to companies interested in participating in the federal SBIR/STTR program. Just a reminder, if you would mute your microphone and then just unmute if you have any questions. We have a lot of material to go through in the next, hour and a half. And if you have questions, please go ahead and actually put them in the chat, and I'll try to take breaks and get your questions answered. So let's go ahead and get started. Maybe. Come on. Don't you love it? This is our agenda for today. We've got, as I said, a lot of information to cover. And we're going to be talking about the SBIR/STTR process. What does it entail? What's the right fit? Or actually, is this the right fit for your company? Then we're going to talk about how MTI's Technical Assistance Program, or TAP as we call it, can help you be successful within the SBIR/STTR program. We're just briefly going to cover a couple of success stories with the state of Maine and next steps, and then briefly talk about the SBA FAST Award. Now, one of the things that you all need to recognize in working with the federal government is that they love acronyms. So SBA, Small Business Administration, and FAST is Federal and State Technology Partnership Award. So we'll talk briefly about that towards the end. And get right there. All right, let's dive in. The SBIR/STTR program is $4.4 billion for early stage research and development, leading to the commercialization of new products, processes, or services. As I said earlier, SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, it was established in 1982 and offers 3.2% set aside for small businesses to participate in the SBIR program. So extramural means outside of the government. R&D means research and development. So what this is basically saying is that the government doesn't really manufacture anything. They buy everything, or they pay for research and development. So large agencies must set aside funding for this program. It is a law. It is not in perpetuity. It does sunset in the next couple of years, but we can always talk about that later. STTR is the sister program, Small Business Technology Transfer. It was started about 10 years later, and it is 0.5% set aside for an agency's extramural research and development efforts. So, as I said, overseen by the SBA, its purpose and goals is to stimulate technological innovation, and it is the largest source of early stage high-risk technology financing in the U.S. And what's really important about this is it helps small businesses play a role in the national research and development arena. Most of the time until this program was set up, a lot of the research went to nonprofit research institutions and federal labs, and also small other labs. So it's important to know that this is a program that these large business, and I also should have added large businesses, where the small business is always the applicant and always the awardee. So you can subcontract, and we'll get into this later, with nonprofit research institutions and large businesses, but that you will always be the applicant. The goals: innovation, commercialization, participation, and technology transfer. Participation means that there is a concerted effort now to get more women and minority-owned businesses into the program. Commercialization is, it is not just basic R&D, it is applied research and development. So what that means is they're going to give you money, as they call it, seed funding, to help bring your product to market. They're going to get you, hopefully, to a stage where other outside investors will be able and interested to invest in your business and actually bring products to market. And innovation, the definition of innovation basically, what would I say? I think I would probably say that innovation depends on the agency. There are different levels of innovation, but they're not looking for Me Too products, nor in many cases version 2.0. There's one agency, the National Science Foundation, that talks about paradigm shifting deep technology, while another agency might say new to the target market area. So it all depends, but every agency has innovation at its core. Now, one of the other things you're going to hear me say throughout this webinar is that it depends. And that is because the SBA has provided the foundation for these agencies to participate in the SBIRSTTR program. However, each agency tends to handle it a little bit different. So that's why it'll depend, or it depends, in my answers to some of your questions. Oh, wrong way. Pardon me. All right. Benefits. So we've already talked about them a couple of times. It funds early stage research and development. This means that you're going to receive funding normally one stage after friends and family money. But when you're too early for, say, Maine Technology Institute funding, or investor funding, angel funding, all of those later stage funding sources love this SBIRSTTR program because it helps to de-risk the technology, right? Makes your technology a little stronger, confirms that it will work, or will work, yes, will work as you go through to develop it, and that there is a true market, or that there are people interested in buying your product. Now, a key point here is that there is no repayment or cost match. This is a grant or a contract, and if, as you go throughout the effort, you find that your hypothesis doesn't work the way you proposed it would, then you just stop work, or you don't go on to the next phase. So there is no repayment of money spent, nor does it require a cost match. This is also the only program within the federal government where intellectual property or data rights, where the owner, the small business, keeps that IP. And that is really what is really important to you, because as a small business, and most likely as a startup, the only capital, if you will, is your intellectual property. So you will always get to own the IP. Now, there are extenuating circumstances, if you will, or conditional circumstances when you start working with a nonprofit research institute, and we'll talk about that later. So it's non-dilutive as well. So in addition to getting to keep your IP, you get to keep 100% ownership of your business. The federal government, the agency, is not going to take any ownership of your company. And then depending on the agency you are working with, there could be direct follow-on phase 3 funds, and so awards. And what does phase 3 mean? Well, I'll talk about that shortly. All right, SBIRSTTR program. How does it work? Well, it is a gated program, and what's important to know is that depends as well. There are certain programs within this SBIR-STTR program where you could deviate from this process. So a phase one is where most companies enter. And that phase one is for feasibility. It's will my idea work? And in that 6 month to 1 year effort, you're going to receive up to $276,000 or more to prove feasibility. So what do we mean by feasibility? When we say, will my idea work? In your application or your proposal, you're going to propose technical objectives and then develop a scope of work of how the task that you're going to set forth and then execute helps prove your hypothesis that your technology works as proposed. That feasibility doesn't have to be a product or a widget in your hand. It could be the framework for a software app. It could be a benchtop prototype, but not in, at scale. It could be a number of different things. So that's what feasibility means. Now, if you're successful in proving feasibility in a phase one, you're going to go on to a phase two. Hopefully, you're going to find that this is a pretty cool program and you really like doing this work. So in a phase two, you're going to have 2 years to go ahead and do the prototype development. You're going to get, depending on the agency, up to $1.9 million to do that prototyping. Huge, a lot of money. And what's interesting when you go through this program, and the success rates are quite high in phase two. In a phase one, success rates are 12 to 17%. In a phase two, they're 40 to 50%. So, and then there's phase three. You'll always hear about phase three, but it's important to know that there is no SBIR, STTR specific money. So phase three funding comes, say, from the Department of Defense, let's say Army. You've gone through a phase one, you've got a phase two, and now they're really liking your product and they're going to start working to insert it in a program. And by insertion in a program, it's a program of record such as warfighter, okay, or an Air Force, one of their programs for one of their planes or departments. So that's what we mean by phase three. It is considered commercialization, but there is no SBIR, STTR funding. So let me just go back a minute here. When I was talking about phases and how different agencies have programs, within each agency, you might see a direct to phase two. What does that mean? Well, that means that you have already proven feasibility, and in your application, you can say, hey, I've already proved feasibility. I looked at these objectives. It's performed X, Y, and Z. Now I'm ready to do prototyping, and that's allowable. In the case of the National Institutes of Health, and I'll talk about the agencies in a minute, you can do a fast track program, and that's submitting a phase one and phase two together. That's really a challenge because you're proposing basically a 3-year work plan. So good. Okay, we'll get into the details in a few minutes. Now, important to remember that this is the federal government and they don't move quickly. You need to be patient, and that's why I call this patient capital. Once you identify an institute or an agency, and then you start working, hopefully, with MTI's Technical Assistance Program, which is a group of consultants led by me, one of the first things you'll need to do is start strategizing of what your phase one's going to look like. So you go through that 1 to 2 month, actually 1 month is a little bit tight. So I would say 2 to 4 months to write and submit a proposal. If you're really going to do it right, then it's going to take that amount of time. It's 140 to 150 hours if you've never written a proposal before. There's a lot of pieces to this effort. It then gets submitted to your agency for review. And the review can happen by internal or external panel of reviewers. Again, it depends on the agency, but that's going to take 4 to 6 months. We've seen some movement over the past year or so where reviews and notifications are happening in about 90 days. So they're moving a little bit quicker. Then there might be a 1 to 2 month award process where the documents get handed over to the contracting officer, and then they initiate either your phase 1 or phase 2 award. And then you will have terms and conditions under which you have to perform the work. You then have in a phase 1, 6 to 12 months period of performance for phase 1. You go through, you do your work, you're maybe writing monthly reports if you're working with DOD. It might be 2 reports for the National Science Foundation. And you're starting to work again with MTI's TAP team to submit your phase 2 proposal. That is a quicker review process. That's 4 to 4 months normally, because you're only competing against other phase 2 awardees. You're not competing against phase 1s, just phase 2s. You then have a 2-year period of performance for phase 2 to do that prototype development, and then you've got commercialization. So it's patient capital. And while I say 2 years, it's probably more likely 3 years that it's going to take, if not longer. It depends on what you're developing. Clearly, if you're developing medical devices, there's a much longer process post phase 2, such as FDA approval and clearance, as compared to a farm implement that's been funded by the USDA. All right, so I've been talking about these federal agencies, and here they are. We have the Department of Defense, which is the largest. We have the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Energy, and then we have the National Science Foundation, NASA, and the USDA Department of Agriculture. Now, what's important to know that within these programs or within these agencies, the ones on the left have both programs. And they are so large and they have so much money, if you will, funding, that they're going to handle their SBIRSTTR process differently. And by that, I mean the National Institutes of Health will issue 1 solicitation a year, and there will be multiple due dates, January 5th, April 5th, September 5th. So a company can plan throughout the year as to when they're going to submit to one of the, I think there's 27 institutes within the National Institutes of Health. The Department of Energy has 2 solicitations a year, and DOD is trying something new. They have something called AFWorks or SOF Works, and that is quick and smaller dollar values, but it gets you into the DOD contracting process. They also issue multiple solicitations a year and also individual topics as they find a need for that. USDA is relatively small. They issue 1 solicitation a year, and that's in June or July normally, with proposals due in October, roughly. And then NASA is one that actually I think their phase 1 is open right now. And then they only participate, I believe, once a year. And then the National Science Foundation is similar to NIH, the National Institutes of Health. NSF has issued their solicitation for the year, and they have what I call rolling windows. So they have 3 windows this year. I think it's March 1st, June 1st, and October or November 1st. Roughly. I mean, don't quote me on those exact dates. But what happens is one window closes, the next window opens. So you want to submit within the window. What they'll do is when the window closes, they'll gather up all of the applications, all submitted electronically, and then begin the review process. So those, as I said, the agencies on the left, SBIRSTTR, and the agencies on the right, the smaller agencies, only have an SBIR program. We have the Department of Homeland Security, we have the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, EPA, and Department of Commerce. Now, within the Department of Commerce, there are 2 agencies, or excuse me, departments that participate. One is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and the other is NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And their solicitation is now open. But in this case, with NOAA, you had to submit a letter of intent by January 13th, notifying them of what your technology is and then preparing the proposal. What that does is allow NOAA to line up the reviewers in advance and also say, no, you're off base with your idea. So it's not of interest to NOAA, to us. So we're going to decline your invitation, if you will, to submit a full proposal. The National Science Foundation has also implemented something called a project pitch. You cannot automatically submit to the National Science Foundation unless you go through a project pitch. That gets reviewed, and then you get invited to submit a full proposal. So every agency has its nuances, and that's what I'm here, and the TAP team is here to help guide you through the process. All right, so I have been talking about SBIR and STTR, and you're like, well, what is it? Okay, well, let's talk about that in a little more detail. I've given you some of the background, but I think what's important for you to know is that within the SBIR-STTR program, it's always about research and development leading to the commercialization of new products, processes, and services. The sister program, as we've talked about, the STTR, promotes the R&D between the private and public sector. And what that simply means is that within the SBIR program, you may partner with a nonprofit research institute, whereas an STTR, remember that's technology transfer, small business technology transfer, it requires you to partner with a nonprofit research institution. So go down a couple more lines and we talk about the work requirement based on the budget. So in a phase 1 SBIR, the small business has to do 67% of the work and may subcontract out 33%, moving to 50% in a phase 2. And subcontracting simply means consultants and other companies that are external to your company. Everything else goes into your 67% bucket, if you will. Under an STTR, the minimums are the small business must do 40% of the work, and then the subcontracted research institution partner can do 30% of the work. The other 30% can be divvied up between the two of you, or it can be awarded to other subcontractors, companies, or it can go to consultants, or it can be that that the research partner does 60% of the work. It varies based on what your requirements and needs are. Now, whenever there is an award and you're starting to work on your project, there's a person called the principal investigator. And the principal investigator is the person with the technical chops that can lead the effort. That person does not have to have a PhD, but the technical expertise needed to oversee and guide the research and development effort. So you'll see in an SBIR, the primary employment must be with the small business, and that is at time of award, not at time of proposal submission. Now, in an STTR, the principal investigator can be from either the small business or the research institution, but there will always be like a contact PI from the small business. Okay, you can see the program sizes is quite a big difference if you go back to the percentages from one of my early slides. So it's roughly, and these numbers are old, it's probably more like almost 4 billion, probably SBIR, and then STTR is somewhere probably $500 million to $1 billion. It's crazy monies. Now, again, here's another nuance. Some of the agencies allow majority VC ownership. Primarily, the only agency right now that has enacted and enabled that rule is the National Institutes of Health, and you'll find that mostly for drug development. 11 participating agencies in the SBIR program and 5 in the STTR. The newest one just being added is the USDA. Now, what some of these agencies, which I think I find interesting, is, and specifically the National Science Foundation, is, let's say you submit an SBIR and you're going to do 67% of the work, and the research institution's doing 33%. Well, if there are not enough, or there's monies left over from the review of the STTR side, the NSF may reach out to you and say, hey, we want to turn this into an STTR. Dollar values are the same for the phase 1 awards. It's just that they have monies available in an STTR versus in an SBIR. So it's a neat little nuance, and it allows your research to continue. One thing I've not said, and it's important for you to note that with a 12 to 17% success rate in a phase 1, if you're not successful, you're going to get reviewer comments, and then you can retool, rewrite, and resubmit your proposal, where your odds for success go up in a phase 2. All right, we've already talked about some of the nuances. There's grants, there's contracts. That simply means that the level of reporting detail in a phase 1, phase 2 is different under a grant and under a contract. For instance, DOD may say we want a monthly report, and the USDA says give us 2 reports a year, an interim and a final report. Dollar amounts vary across the agencies. Even the smallest agencies are probably $100,000 to $150,000 phase 1s, while the larger agencies such as National Institutes of Health, you can apply for a waiver and you can get a $300,000 to $400,000 phase 1 and a almost $2 million phase 2. So again, it depends. While the length of the application can vary, most of the agencies in a phase 1 require a 15-page project narrative. And that project narrative is where you're going to be discussing how you're going to do the work. Why is it? What's the significance? Why is it important? Who's the team? What's the commercialization look like? Even though this is a phase 1, they want to know what your market is. They want to know if the team is qualified to bring the product to market. Who's your competition? So length of application and the content will vary somewhat from agency to agency, but the basics are all the same. How it gets submitted. We are now all electronic and have been for many years, which is good. When I first cut my teeth on the program in the early 90s, it was all via paper. And it used to be 10 to 15 copies. You had to print, staple, collate, staple, and then send FedEx. It was crazy. So doing over the internet is much easier. However, each agency has a different portal in many cases. For instance, the National Science Foundation has FastLane. They are now transitioning to research.gov. Many of the granting agencies are using grants.gov. DOD has its own submittal portal. So we'll talk about this later, but there's quite a lengthy registration process as well. But which you'll want to get started if you think you're going to go through the program, and then we can help you get set up to complete the forms online and then successfully submit the proposal. The level of scientific discussion actually changes a fair amount. And what's important to know here is, and I think hopefully you remember I said earlier that the level of innovation, or the definition of innovation, is slightly different across the agencies. So in many cases, NSF wants paradigm shifting, innovative, deep technology. The USDA has a topic called rural and community development. And what they're doing is, and what they're interested in, is supporting and improving the lives of people in rural America. So it does not necessarily to be a new innovation, but it's just new to that area. For instance, telehealth was a big one years ago. Firefighting is of big interest to the USDA. So levels, they have a topic called small and mid-sized farms. So if it's going to help a farmer manage their farm or improve their products or whatever they're trying to sell or grow and sell, it might be of interest to USDA. So little different definition there in the level of scientific discussion. And another big agency difference would be National Institutes of Health. They have a very high level of scientific rigor that is expected from those that submit. So that is, again, a very different process than, say, from Department of Energy or the National Science Foundation. We talked briefly about the proposal review process being differently. So the agencies have internal reviewers, and it's all done in-house, such as the Department of Defense, although they might have some of their contractors' experts review the proposals, whereas the National Science Foundation convenes a board virtually now of experts, both from a technical side and from the commercialization side. And then we review the proposals and then get into a discussion about the scientific and technical merits and the commercialization potential. So it all does depend based on the agency that you are submitting to. All right, so we've been going about half an hour. I'm going to have a look at some of the questions and see what we've got. The one thing I may say is hold that thought, because I'll probably get to it before the end of the webinar. And then if I don't, then we can go back and address it. All right, Michelle asks, is success rate the same as percent of applicants that received an award? Yes, it is the same. So when we say a 12 to 17% success rate, that is the number of applicants that receive an award. Now, the National Science Foundation, when COVID kicked in, saw their number of applicants increase exponentially, and they have been scrambling ever since to get more program directors, and that can handle the number of increased awards and get them reviewed in a timely fashion. Laura asked, how do you know which federal agency you may be the best fit for funding? So, really good question. I love that one, Laura. And I'm going to say it depends on your technology. In most cases, you will be able, or you and I working together as we go through what's known as an SBIR discovery effort, we'll go through, we'll talk about your technology, and I'll say it might be a fit to the National Science Foundation and the USDA, or the DoD could be interested in it, and it's also a good fit for Department of Energy. So what we'll do is we'll look at where your technology fits, which agency has solicitations upcoming, and then where you are at in your level of readiness to apply. And the good thing is within this program, and there is overlap in terms of what these agencies are interested in, is that you can submit the same or similar application to more than one agency. You just need to disclose that. All right. Then if you're lucky enough to get an award first time out, then you can let the other agency know. And well, you have to let the other agency know, and maybe either withdraw your application or talk to them about the possibility of modifying your scope of work if it makes it through the review process. So good question. Thank you. All right. Christina says, can you give us examples of successful applicants? And are startups with new ideas successful in getting funding, or awardees typically more established, larger, small businesses? I love these questions. Thank you. So the SBA has defined a small business as under 500 employees. So if you're in the state of Maine, guess what? You probably are a small business, most likely, and you qualify for this program. There's only a handful of companies that have more than 500 employees. So yes, it can be a startup. And I'm sorry, you have to be a small business and you have to be organized for profit. But what's to know is that most of the awards across all these agencies are to companies of 2 to 9 employees. Now, there can be larger companies that do apply, and I'll have a couple of examples of companies coming up, but it can be 50 employees, it can be 100 employees, it can be 499 employees. One of the examples that outgrew the program is a company called TexTech. Their claim to fame is tennis ball felt, but they also did an awful lot of innovative research. And then there are other smaller companies that are 20 or 30 employees. Some agencies will allow you to come back on new projects, but agencies in many cases like NSF really only wants to see you once or twice because they want you to be successful on the project that you proposed. Okay, good. All right, and these are just some of the national companies that have grown thanks to the SBIRSTTR program. One of the ones I just love is the iRobot. That used to be an IED device, and now it cleans your floors. Another one is the, it's not the water pick toothbrush, but I can't think of the name of it now. But anyways, you get the idea. All of these companies started out using SBIRSTTR funding. It's a great way to keep your R&D pipeline full. Okay, so is it right for you? Let's see. We've already said it's got to be for profit. You have to have less than 500 employees, and the small business has to be owned and operated in the US. All right. The work must be done in the US as well. Okay, this is yours and mine, our taxpayer dollars at work here. So they want the work going to US companies and consultants. You can bring in someone from overseas, but the work must be done in the US. So keep that in mind. If you're currently working with a company out of India on software development, you'll need to transfer that into the US. The focus, again, as I mentioned, is applied research and development, not basic research. So they're presuming that you've already done some preliminary research or conducted paper research to prove that your hypothesis will work. The SBA has a website devoted to the SBIRSTTR program, and you can find that at www.sbir.gov. That is a really good site that I encourage you to look at because you're going to find links to all of the federal agencies. You can also do keyword searches on topics of interest from these agencies. And then you can do award research about what agency made awards using your keywords. So that's a good thing because you'll see what agencies may have funded your work in the past, but also find out who your competition could be. Now, here's what's important. Is it right for you? I'm going to tell you right from the very beginning, please do not chase the money just because it's there. It's not the best reason for you to be into business and to try to get products to market. You know, you need to look if you have and consider if you have the technical competence. Can you oversee the project development? If not, what does your team look like? So the question was asked is, you know, are these established companies or small? It's okay in a phase one to be a company of one, preferably two. But what's important is who have you surrounded yourself with, right? What does your team look like? The credible team is very, very important. So if you need expertise in software development or AI or machine learning or whatever it might be, you need to look at a nonprofit research institution to be your partner. Okay. You can also partner with other small businesses, and then one of you take the lead and be the applicant. You can have consultants advise you, and they can all be part of your team. So if you're missing expertise, then you need to try to form your team. As I said, they can be outside the company. I also suggest more so in a phase 2 than a phase 1, but again, it depends on where you are in the growth of your business, that you have an informal board of advisors. Those advisors, again, will be the ones who will help fill the voids that your company currently doesn't have. All right, is this innovative technology achievable? So is it going to meet your goals with your product development? And also, because this is a federal program to where they are interested in furthering or meeting their mission needs, does it have a strong societal benefit? Very, very important. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the review criteria is intellectual merit and societal impact. Okay. Also, too, because these institutes are funding you, they're investing in your company, they want to know, are you going to be able to give them a strong return on their dollars invested? All right. Are you going to, when an institute or an agency gives you or awards you, I shouldn't say give, because you're going to work very hard for this money, $1 million to $2 million, they would like to see that in 5 to 10 years that you're going to have a very strong return on dollar investment, which indicates that there's a strong market interest into your program. They do expect that it's going to take you a while to get there and that you're going to need outside investor dollars. But, if you're investing $2 million, if they're investing $2 million and your market size is only 3 to 5 million in 10 years, that might not be the best fit. So we would have to discuss that. And then what are your long-term plans? Remember, I told you that it's patient capital, and it's going to take 3 to 4 years for you to commercialize your innovation. Okay. Do you have the interest in growing and scaling a business? And if you don't, and you're trying to, if you're not interested in growing the business and you want to license that, then what you need to do from that standpoint is start looking at, who do you license it to? Start making those contacts. Okay, so we'll talk about, as we go through the development process in phase 1 and definitely in phase 2, is what does your business roadmap look like, and what does your technology roadmap look like as well? So you need to start really considering that. All right, so the SBIRSTTR program is complex, and that is why the Maine legislature, in its wisdom, if you will, decided that it was very, very important to have someone to kind of guide you through the process. And that's what MTI's SBIR TAP Team Technical Assistance Program will do. All right, we've already talked about the success rate and how you can reapply if it gets declined, because you're going to have reviewer comments that are going to tell you what are the strengths and weaknesses of your proposal, which is great. And it gives you a really strong opportunity to be successful the second time around. Phase 2, 40 to 50%, federal agencies, all with nuances. The NIH, National Institutes of Health, used to tout themselves as being the Gumby of the group, that everything was applicable, but there were a lot of exceptions. But we have to ensure, no matter what we do, that it's a technology fit to an agency, right? You don't want to write a proposal that they're not going to fund. It's too much effort. It's too much time. And it's going to be one of the most intensive things that you've ever done, most likely in your startup career. But it's going to be absolutely amazing, because even those that don't get funded say it's a very valuable process. It's forcing you to take the idea out of your head, put it on paper, and develop those tasks and objectives that are going to help bring the product to market. So it's a valuable enterprise exercise. All right, so let's see, where are we at? All right, so what do these agencies fund? I've talked about solicitations. Well, each agency will issue a solicitation, and within that solicitation are topics of interest. All right, so that's where that technology fit comes between your company and the agency. And all of these areas of interest listed are across almost all agencies. Even though it's AI, it can be agriculture AI, it could be environmental AI, it could be defense AI, or autonomy or cybersecurity. So again, it's really key here to never judge an agency by its name. Very important, because as I said, I can normally fit your technology into more than one agency, and that's pretty cool. All right, I'm going to take this one question Tom Law just asked on the is SBIR right for your business topic. IP disclosure and ownership rights. Yikes. I can just say that within the IP world, within the SBIR program, all of the intellectual property rights remain with the small business. If you go STTR, then you're going to be expected to negotiate ownership rights to the technology. And that is something, in many cases, prior to an award, you must have a technology agreement in place with your nonprofit research institution. In terms of DoD, you have data disclosure rights, and you can normally go in and say, this is what I'm bringing into the process. Here's what you get ownership from of DoD as part of the development. Same with a research institution. In most cases, the research agreement, the technology agreement will say the small business retains ownership to what it brings to the table. Same with the research institution. And then what is developed with federal funding gets split. So it all depends. This is the only federal program where all of the ownership rights to the IP remains with the small business. So going back to these technology areas of interest, I just took a moment and used the slide to give you an idea what the National Science Foundation funds. Now, there are two types of agencies, and the first type being the granting type agencies, like the National Science Foundation. They're going to issue solicitations with very broad topics. They're going to say within environmental technologies, it might deal with the blue economy. Okay. Now, in that case, you are the investigator proposing to develop a technology that meets this very broad goal. Other agencies, like contract agencies, such as the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy, will say, more specifically in this case, I'll talk about DoD. Phase one, here are the tasks that we would like to see you execute in a phase one. Here's what we see the outcome being in phase one. Here's what a phase two looks like. And here's the product that we want. That's a contracting agency. And the biggest difference between those two types of agencies is the fact that DoD is going to be the customer and will be buying your product. They have a mission. They're looking to the small business to solve their problem, and then they'll buy the product. The National Science Foundation, USDA, they'll never be your customer. All right. They're more interested in, and their mission and goal is to move the science forward and to improve the lives of people within the US. So keep that in mind. Different agencies, different nuances. DoD, you really never know what topics are going to come out until their solicitation is issued. But agencies like National Science Foundation, USDA, No, other topics don't change much from year to year, and they're very broad. So it's what we call investigator-initiated research and development. Here's the U.S. Department of Agriculture topic areas, very broad: forest and related resources, food science, nutrition, rural and community development. This is one of the topic areas I alluded to earlier, where it does not have to necessarily be new innovation, but it can improve the lives of people in rural areas. What's important here to look at under rural and community development is they want to evaluate the socioeconomic impact of your technology. So you're going to have to work with an agency, an institute or an organization that can help you analyze your potential impact. Agritourism is a big one under rural and community development now. So aquaculture, land-based fishing and farming, if you will, small and mid-sized farms, wide variety. Now, if you noticed, I put on each of the slides, I believe I have the links to that agency's SBIRSTTR program. Okay, what's good is all of these agencies leave their old solicitation on their website until the new one gets issued. So there's no waiting until a solicitation gets released for you to have to wait and then look at the solicitation. They don't change that much from year to year, and it gives you a head start. They also, all of the agencies list the awards that they've made, so you can see what they've awarded under their different topic areas. All right, we've talked a fair amount about the submission and review process. It is electronic submissions, 4 to 6 months. Unfortunately, in many cases, with the National Science Foundation, it is taking longer than 4 to 6 months in some cases. And we're also seeing them hold proposals to the end of the year in case there's funding available. But every agency has its nuances, okay? But it is, the reviews are my experience, and I've been, myself and Suzanne Hamlin have been reviewers for the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, is that all of these program directors or project directors take their roles and responsibilities very seriously. They take the time to bring together strong reviewers and who provide thoughtful reviews and comments, so that even though you're going to be angry and frustrated, that decline because your proposal is the best one ever, right? But that you will learn what the weaknesses are because they can see the forest for the trees. And these are the evaluation criteria: scientific and technical merit, societal benefits, risk. The agencies want risk. They do not want engineering exercises. Commercial potential is very important. With the National Science Foundation, you're asking you to submit up to a 9-page commercialization plan as part of phase 1, with a 5-page technical intellectual merit section, figuring that you know the technology, but how well can you explain its potential? And then the company, the credibility of the team. And I'm going to tell you that outside investors, most outside investors love the SBIRSTTR program because it is de-risking the technology. So if Shane Beckim is on, I will probably turn this the microphone over to Shane. Shane is a senior investment officer at the Maine Technology Institute and my liaison, because I am a consultant to the Maine Technology Institute. Shane, are you on? Let's see if I can find him. Bear with me a minute. He had mentioned earlier he was having connectivity issues because of a power outage, so he may not be on. So, all right, since it looks like he is not on, I'll go ahead and talk about the Maine Technology Institute's TAP program. Excuse me. So the TAP program was established when the SBIR program was absorbed, or became a focus for the Maine Technology Institute. I've been working with Maine small businesses since 1997 on the SBIRSTTR program, helping guide the companies through the process. I first learned it through through a company I worked with in 1990 in Silicon Valley, where I was the 100th employee hired, and within 5 years, they had outgrown the program. So MTI's TAP program consists of consultants providing specialized support pro bono to small businesses. And it is the focus only on, well, I shouldn't say only, on the SBIRSTTR program and other federal funding opportunities that have a research and development component. But our primary focus is on, excuse me, on the SBIRSTTR program. So once, and I'll describe the process in a minute, but what you're going to get is an overview and an understanding of the program and how you can participate. We're going to help guide the development of your application or proposal. We're going to help give you commercialization strategy and market research. So we have Suzanne Hamlin, who is our commercialization expert, and we have 2 market researchers that will get assigned your job or your TAP award, and we'll do secondary market research into, what does the market look like? Who's your competition? What are the, what's the growth rate of your market? Who are likely potential investors? Who are partners? All of these different strategy areas will be covered as part of the commercialization development and also the market research. We also have 2 fellows that will provide you government accounting assistance, and that includes developing your indirect cost rate, those costs associated with you being in business, your budget and your budget justifications. So we'll get them all in line and in compliance with the requirements. Suzanne and I, more so me than Suzanne, do technical editing and reviewing, but Suzanne and I both review the commercialization sections of an application, and where necessary, let's say you're going to do an economic cost benefit analysis as a task, I'll bring Suzanne in to guide the development of that task. I'll help you with form preparation, and then this is all phase 1. You get about 10 hours of everyone's time, plus about 20 for me. And then just because we don't stop if we hit 10 hours and say, see you later, you're not on your own. And then you get the same for phase 2, only you get 20 hours from each of these areas of support. Now, you'll also get kickoff support for a phase 2 where we start strategizing. You can also apply to the Maine Technology Institute for funding to cover a grant writer or a subject matter expert who's going to help you do the work. And what else? There was something else I was going to talk about. I can't remember it at this point. So if I remember it, I will come back. All right, so this is the process in working with the TAP team at MTI. You'll go to mainetechnology.org, and across the top, there's a tab that says started. You'll register if you've not done business with MTI, and then you'll complete an intake form. You'll go through the discovery. You'll go through a discovery effort or a period of time with me, where you and I will discuss your technology fit to the institutes. We'll talk about the team, and we'll develop a plan of action, if you will. Once we have identified an agency and a topic, then we're going to move your intake form from discovery to active management. All right. I'm going to recommend that you register, you start the registration process. And actually, as I said earlier, if you're going to think you're going to participate, start the registration process now. There is an agency or an organization within the state of Maine called the Maine PTAC. maineptac.org. And you can Google it. PTAC is another acronym called Procurement Technical Assistance Center. So it's maineptac.org. It'll soon be changing names to Apex Accelerator, but that organization, you will be assigned a counselor. Again, it's a free service, and they will guide you through the entire registration process. You know, you'll have to do IRS registration of your business, get your EIN from the IRS. Then you need to go to sam.gov to go through this whole registration process. Then there are agency registration processes, and then SBIR.gov registration. Please do not attempt the sam.gov registration on your own. If you do and you mess it up, it's going to take weeks and months to submit, to correct. And you may miss your opportunity to submit your proposal. And I have seen people who have attempted it on their own, and it's taken 3, 6, or 9 months to get it cleared up. So please use please use maineptac.org. It's the easiest way, experts in it, and it's at no cost to you. We go through the proposal development process. We had talked about the number of hours. I say 140 to 150, and it could be more depending on your level of expertise and skill at writing. It's an iterative review process between you, me, and Suzanne Hamlin. And also, too, we're going to be encouraging you to talk to customers and start looking at meaningful letters of support. Those actually interested in developing the MTI, developing your technology or investing in your company. So those letters of support are very important. And I'll have people talk to me and say, well, I don't have my product developed yet. I can't talk to my customers without the widget in my hand. And I'm going to say, if you wait till that happens, you've waited too long. The expectation is that you know what the customer wants even before you develop your product. All right, the review process, as I said, is iterative. The more rounds of reviews your application goes through, the more strong your proposal will be. It'll be impactful. It will be insightful. It will be tight. It will be concise. So the more reviews we have, the better off it will be. And then finally, you submit your proposal. So again, the TAP services are free to you. We encourage you to take up that offer and allow MTI to guide you through it. So the question is where's the application for the SBIR support? So under the Get Started tab, after you've registered, you're going to complete a new intake form. Once you go through that, as you start completing that intake form, there's a drop-down menu. And there's one entry that says, I want to submit, or I'm working on an SBIR. That's where you will click submit or SBIR, and that's what gets you into the SBIR discovery. So you've got to go into and start completing the intake form to see that.
The intake form is under MTI general funding, so it's a little confusing.
Not the Get Started registration. No, Get Started has its own tab. Oh, within that, you're right. It is under general funding.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point, Suzanne. Thank you. All right. Again, we've already talked about this. Phase 2, we look at the company more holistically, which I think is really important. But we're there to support you. All right. So just a quick snapshot of the awards in Maine. $136 million. That number's probably a little bit higher since we got started. Not too many companies, 137, but they've won over 870 awards. So it's huge. You know, you have a very high success rate, higher success rate using the TAP services, because we short circuit the holy cow, I need to learn and understand all of this. We kind of really help you and guide you through the process. These are some of the success stories, and this will all be posted on the website. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time because I want to allow for questions. Rockstep Solutions is a Tibbetts awardee. They received a phase 1. They were declined once, they resubmitted and won the second time around. And then they also received a phase 2. Growing Great Guns. Chuck Donnelly has been very successful in developing Climb and his business. Unar Labs is a great example of technology transfer, if you will. Dr. Harry Polani and Dr. Giudici developed this assistive technology that allows visually impaired individuals to read Braille basically on their smartphone, okay, to do charts and maps and tablets. So Hari's done very well with this. We're really excited about the work he's done, and we expect great things from him. Montalvo Corp, now the past 2 companies were startups. I think Rockstep probably had 1 full-time and 2 part-time people when they first started out. Now they have, several tens or more employees. I'm not sure how many they have, under 100 at this point. But Montalvo, when they applied, were about 50 employees. They submitted phase 1. They did not make it sound risky enough to the National Science Foundation. They thought they saw an engineering exercise, but it was actually very, very important. And it opened up, this technology opened up a whole new market for them. So they resubmitted resubmitted their proposal, received a phase 1, went on to receive a phase 2. And what we haven't talked about in a whole lot of detail is the phase 2B. And those are follow-on funding programs, and several of the agencies have these follow-on funding elements where with the NSF phase 2B, they will match outside investment funding 50 cents on the dollar, but it cannot be contingency funding. It has to be a contingency-free investment in your company. The Department of Energy has 3 follow-on funding programs, and I think each one is $1 million. And the third one requires match. So it's, again, recognizing at the end of phase 2, you may not be ready for the market, and in most cases you won't be. All right, next steps, explore SBIR.gov. We've talked about that. Sign up for the agency listservs. All of the agencies have them. All of the agencies do presentations, especially when their solicitation is released, and they're also posted on their websites. And I'm going to say, read the solicitation once we identify an opportunity. It's really, really important that you understand what they're asking for and you give it to them the way they want it. Very important. We talked about how to get started at mainetechnology.org. Also, by the way, at MTI's website, under what we fund is a link to their federal funding assistance page, where you will find links to presentations, consultant biographies, all sorts of information to help you get ready to start your proposal development journey. Pull together your team, read the solicitation, understand what's being expected of you. Now, if you Google sample SBIR applications, you're going to find them, and you're going to find the quality is questionable in many cases because no one really wants to put their own technology out there for others to look at. But if you want to see it, that's great. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Hamlin, who's going to talk about the award MTI received this year called FAST, Federal and State Technology Partnership Award. Suzanne?
Thanks, Karen.
Sure.
And I hope that I can't see myself since I'm looking at your shared screen, but I hope that the video is okay. I'm not in my office, but so MTI has had several of these federal awards over the years. The point of these funding opportunities that MTI has received is to help us do an even better job with this technical assistance program. And in this case, specifically, is really to try to get more proposals from underrepresented groups, which includes women, socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and, oh, by the way, small businesses in underrepresented areas, which means rural states. And since we're a rural state, that pretty much covers just about everybody in the state. We can use, this is the first of a 5-year funding effort. It's focused on a couple different areas. This year's work, we are going to be focusing on education and outreach, of which this webinar is one portion of that. We are then going to do sort of more work than we normally do, trying to find additional companies that we might not have met before, who might be well positioned to think about an SBIR, STTR application. We are going to then work even more closely with those companies and our partner organizations in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the state of Maine to try to really make sure that they are very well positioned and well prepared to submit a proposal sometime in the summer or fall of this year. And as an added incentive, we are going to hold a pinch competition in the middle of the year for those companies that have been working on this, are well positioned, are getting ready to submit a proposal. And that pitch competition, unlike a lot of pitch competitions where the award tends to go to whoever has the most polished presentation and all the answers, if you will, in this case, we really want to highlight some of the differences with this funding opportunity, which is that it is very focused on riskiness of the technology and but having a good plan to try to de-risk that technology. So we are very much looking forward to hearing from all of you who have good ideas that you think is very innovative, and we'll see where we go from there.
Thank you, Suzanne. And this is just an idea of what we're looking to develop. Did you want to talk a little bit about how our base year will end, Suzanne?
In terms of the pitch competition, Karen?
Yes. Yeah. And how that's not the end of the program, if you will.
Yeah. So after, this year's award goes through the end of the federal fiscal year, which is the end of September. We will be having this pitch competition somewhere in the late spring, early summer, probably. And then we will be continuing to work with those companies that were participating in that to get their proposals submitted. Then we will also this spring be working on exactly what our activities for next year's award are going to be involving. We know that we will be doing more work to support some of the companies that have actually gotten phase 1 awards as a part of this, but some of that is yet to be determined still.
Great, thank you. And we're looking to do more and more every year. So it's going to be interesting, and we're quite excited with the opportunity to continue providing education, outreach, and support to Maine small businesses. Just briefly, Tom asked, can you elaborate a bit on the practically everyone qualifying for a rural business? Specifically, does that include Portland? Yes, Maine is considered a rural state. So that means literally anyone who has a business that is doing innovative research and development is a potential company or potential applicant to the SBIRSTTR program. Going back to my slide about what, how is a small business defined? It's under 500 employees and it must be organized for profit. Those are, and the ownership of the small business must be by US citizens. Those are the three hard factors that a company has to comply with to be eligible to apply. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, here's some more information about the pitch competition. It's all about the risk is what we've talked about throughout this entire webinar. They do not want engineering exercises. They want to do meaningful advancements in the science. So that's what's important. That's what that's going to be part of the pitch competition. And we're going to get you ready to submit an awesome application. Contact information, Shane Beckim, excuse me, is my liaison at the Maine Technology Institute. I am Karen West. There's my contact information, and then Suzanne Hamlin, who is our commercialization expert. So if we have any more questions, you can go off on, we've got about 10 minutes left. You can ask them directly or put them in chat, whatever works. I'll make sure that I covered through all the questions. Oh, here's a question from Patrick Corbett. What kind of funding options are there for established consultancy-based businesses who don't develop products, but provide consulting services and want to grow their business? So the definition is research and development leading to the commercialization of new products, processes, and services. In some cases, I would probably have to say it depends on what sort of consulting service you provide. We've worked with climate change or companies. We've worked with advisors that do, I can't even think of, there's been a couple of other ones. Climate advisory is another one. Financial support consultants have been successful in the past. So what we have to do again is look to the fit between your technology and an agency's area of interest. Now, remember that you can go to SBIR.gov and under reports, I believe it is, you can find, you can do a keyword search of everything that the federal government under the SBIR program has funded since its inception. Maybe not that far back, but 1990 at least. And so if you think they've never funded it, you'll be surprised. They fund an awful lot of technology and products, processes, and services. Okay. Let's see. I think we have answered them. Suzanne, Jeremy had asked, and Suzanne replied about return on dollars invested when capital is a grant, not equity based. She replied that ROI is seen as achieving their goals of improving the competitive position of the U.S. and growing small business. So while the government doesn't expect money from the business, they want to see that the company itself will reap financial benefits from their investment. And that's a term. There's a term that I tend to use, and it's called WIFM. What's in it for me? And so the federal government knows that if they're going to give you up to $2 million in research and development funding, they want to know what's in it for them. How are you going to help that agency understand or meet its mission requirements? And that's why when you write your application, you're writing with their eyes, not yours. We all know your technology is gorgeous, it's beautiful, and you love it. But now you have to actually be able to tell those agencies why they should fund your technology, your application over someone else's, because it is a competitive review process. Other questions? Please feel free to unmute and ask them directly. All right. If not, you have my contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Do some of the research at MTI's website under what we fund. Talk to me, look at SBIR.gov, and hopefully we'll get a chance to work together in the near future on a new technology. On your new technology, I should say. And, would love to see you, scale up and become the next iRobot or any other these named products that came through the SBIRSTTR program. I thank you so much for your time and interest, and have a great day and good luck. Thank you. Bye-bye.